Welcome everyone. This is Professor Evelyn Shao Ojeda, and today we are going to be discussing critical discussions, best practices to foster active learning in synchronous online classes. First of all, I would like to invite you visit the Light Center website. In the Light Center, we have lots of materials and resources that you can use to enhance the learning experience of your students and to actually help your classes be more active and more interactive. So please visit the Light Center website, in which we will have lots of resources to help you go through this transition between face-to-face classes to online sessions. Today's agenda, we will be discussing about online learning, but we're going to be focusing on how we can promote critical thinking and active learning without the use of tech tools. Then we're going to discuss a few ideas for fostering critical group discussions and active learning. What can we do as instructors, as facilitators, to help our students think critically, to be able to be completely active and actively involved in their learning process? And let's get started. First of all, the first advice that I would give you is to flip your class. We cannot expect students to discuss something that they don't know anything about. So by flipping your class, you get away from the traditional classroom in which the professor is lecturing the whole class and then after the class assigns a few activities as homework. In the flipped classroom model, what we do is that we ask students to watch videos, to read journal articles, they actually have the lecture before coming to class. So when they come to class, they are already prepared to discuss and to be actively engaged in any activity that we provide in the classroom. Then in the classroom, what we do is activities. What we do is incorporate group discussions and tasks that they can actually, that they will serve as as room, as an opportunity for students to apply what they learned before coming to class. So as you see here, the traditional model, the old school way of teaching was that in class, we provided the new material, we assigned homework for students to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create whatever new content they learned in class. With a flipped model approach, we use it differently. We actually help students to remember and understand the new content before coming to class. How do we do that? They watch videos, they read materials that we assign them beforehand. And then when they come to class, what they do is that they apply, analyze, evaluate, and create with the new knowledge acquired. And that's what we are there for. Then we don't have this role of the instructor, the person who knows it all. We are just the facilitators. Students come to class with lots of knowledge already, and they might have some doubts, and we're there to help. But we're also there to facilitate the process from remembering to evaluating and creating with the new knowledge that they learned. Now, what can you do outside the class? Yes, when we talk about flipping the classroom, what do we mean by it? Well, outside class, students can watch a video related to the topic that you want to discuss during your lessons. They can read articles, journal articles. They can respond to questions posted on the learning management system that you're using at the moment. And actually, this will help you, especially the discussion questions that the students engage online. This will help you understand what is it that you need to actually focus on your class, or what is it that you don't really need to touch upon on your class because students already know. Then in class, what you do is that you clarify points to students. You you help them understand things that maybe they were not that clear for them outside of from the outside of class activities. And then you also provide additional help to students who need more one-on-one assistance. And you can actually personalize the learning experience. While in class, once students know, once students have this knowledge of what they're going to be working on during your sessions. So basically what students do is that they work on assignments related to the topic during the class, which means that they are actually learning actively. They are getting involved in something that they see practicality, and they see that they can actually contribute to the conversation because they know about that. One of the main myths about the flipped learning is that, oh, you know what, flipped learning replaces face-to-face teaching. So if I ask my students to read an article or to actually get new content before coming to class, then what am I going to do if I'm supposed to be the one providing knowledge? Well, actually, that's research shows that it's completely the opposite. Flipped learning optimizes face-to-face teaching. Why? Because you come or you plan your classes with students knowing already what they will be discussing, with students having prior knowledge, way more than just basic prior knowledge, but they have a grasp of what is it that they need to be involved in your lessons. So of course, instead of taking an hour for an activity, it might take you maybe half hour because they already know something, and you can actually take that as as a baseline for your own teaching and for choosing the right and the appropriate strategies in your lessons. Now, there are many tools for flipping your online classroom. There are lots of them. And here I have a link that you will have access to afterwards of 75 digital tools and apps teachers can use to support formative assessment in the classroom. Because whatever you can do on your on-campus sessions or your face-to-face sessions, you can actually do it online, and it can be actually way more interactive. So you can use videos, journal articles, Edpuzzles, Edmodo. You can record your lectures in advance and provide them to students so they can watch before coming to class. And of course, you can use GAP, which is the learning system, the learning management system that we use at Wascliffe University. It's quite flexible, and it has lots of tools and resources that you can use to help your students get engaged and actively involved in their learning. But you know what's important? You can have lots of tech tools, but how can you actually engage students into group discussions? And how can you actually foster active learning in your synchronous online classes without technology? Sometimes we have this feeling of, oh, if I teach online, it means that I need to have lots of high-tech tools involved in my lessons. Well, that's not true. The most important thing in a lesson, apart from your students, of course, they are the heart of your lesson. But the most important and powerful tool that you can use is yourself. The most important and meaningful resource that you have is yourself and the strategies that you use to help your students foster active learning and critical thinking. So today we're going to be discussing a few strategies for group discussions that you can use online, and that they can actually help your students have really critical conversations, and they're going to have fun, they're going to feel engaged, and they're going to feel that they're actively involved in their own learning process. So again, it's you, the instructor, who has the power to change and spice up your lessons. And by doing that, or if you want to do that, you have to do it by choosing the proper strategies to foster active learning during your group discussions. So here we have a few that we want to discuss today. We have think, pair, share. You can also have students designed questions for your discussions. There's a quite nice way to work on a debate called stand, where I stand debate. Socratic seminars, affinity mapping, and finally we're going to be discussing a strategy that is called conversations. So these are ways in which you can actually involve your students in group discussions, and it's different. You get away from this question and answer type of class, and you just involve your students as much as possible in their own group discussions. So let's start with think, pair, and share. Well, this is very simple. You just ask students a question, and you have to think about a really interesting question, a really burning question, and then you have to direct them to first think and write notes on their own. So they have to work individually. It can be from 30 seconds to a minute. It doesn't need to be that long. Then they need to discuss their answers with a classmate. In this case, you can open breakout rooms. You can use Google Hangouts for 3 and 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. It doesn't need to be that long. And then once everyone is back to the main room on Zoom or any other platform you're using, students have to present their ideas to the whole class. As the instructor, you facilitate the discussion, but you can also record these ideas on the screen, and you can ask students then to build on their peers' ideas as the class continues. So it's a very interesting and active learning strategy that you can use for any topic that you want to discuss in your class. One of the things, another strategy that I want to discuss today is this idea of having the instructor doing everything. So when you're planning your lessons, you feel like I am the one who needs to design the questions. I'm the one who needs to ask the questions. But the reality is that in a learner-centered classroom, roles change. And that means the instructor is not actually the instructor anymore, but you are the facilitator. And that means that you assign students more responsibilities during the teaching learning process. So I would recommend to ask your students to design questions after reading whatever that you ask them to read and watch tutorials and videos and lectures before coming to class. Then ask them to design questions and bring them to class, so they can give them to you in advance or in the same lesson, and then you decide which ones, or they actually, among all of them, they can decide which ones will be discussed. This will make them feel like they have the power, they have some kind of power, right? That they own the learning process, and they are actually heard, like their voices are heard and they're taken into consideration when considering group discussions. The next strategy that I want to discuss with you or share with you is a debate strategy called Stand Where I Stand. So what you do here is that you assign readings before class. Again, flipped classroom model. So to begin the activity, what you're going to do is that you're going to use a screen on Zoom, and you're going to write a debatable statement, something really controversial that you know that students need to actually, they have a strong opinion on. Then they have to join breakout rooms depending on their opinion. If you have many students, then you can have a debatable statement and have 4 or 5 different breakout rooms with strongly disagree, agree, and strongly agree, for example. If you have small groups, then you can actually open only 2 breakout rooms with agree and disagree. So what you do is that after you open the breakout rooms, you ask students to position themselves and have them discuss in those breakout rooms their positions and the thoughts about the statement that you just posed on your screen. Then you give them enough time for them to take notes and to discuss their points of view. And then once everyone is back to the main room, you ask a few students to explain their respective positions, okay? Then after you have heard from a few students, you don't need to listen to everyone, just a few students from each group. You have to tell everyone, okay, we are going to move to a different breakout room now. So what they're going to do is that they're going to change rooms, and you're going to repeat this step maybe once or twice more, so as for them to listen to different perspectives. And you want them to reflect if any changes took place in their thinking after listening to other people's opinion. So again, you repeat this maybe once or twice more, and then the most important thing is that you ask students to discuss the process. So you can ask what arguments were most compelling, or why, or what did you hear that made you change your mind or did not help you change your mind? What new questions do you have now after listening to other people's opinion? So this is just way more than just that a typical debate in which there is a pro and con or agree or disagree. But students have to really think. They go through different groups so as to discuss different perspectives, and they actually really need to think about how their own opinions and perspectives change when they're able to listen to other people's arguments and opinions. Another way of making your students speak in class and have great discussions, critical discussions, is what it's called Socratic seminars. So in a Socratic seminar activity, students help one another understand ideas, issues, and values reflected in a text through a group discussion format. So students are responsible for facilitating their group discussion around ideas in the text, but they shouldn't use the discussion to just give their opinion or prove that they're right. Because through this type of discussion, what students do is that they practice how to listen to one another, make meaning, and find common ground while participating in a conversation. So this is actually key. During this seminar, students, they might have a very strong opinion, but the idea is that they learn how to listen to one another, make meaning, and actually find similarities and a common ground while discussing their opinions. So the way to do this is actually, this has to be prepared in advance, and you actually have to teach your students on how to do this. Because what might happen is that they feel like, oh, I need to prove that I'm right. And again, in a Socratic seminar, what's important is that they learn to listen, they learn to respect each other's opinion, and they learn to take into consideration other people's perspectives. So the first thing that they need to do is to select an appropriate text. So the Socratic seminar strategy is based on close textual analysis. So it is important to select a text that provides ample avenues for interpretation and discussion. And that means that you don't want a text that is too simple, because then there won't be anything to discuss. But you don't want it to be too long. So because then it will be difficult for them to read closely and to be able to do it during the allotted amount of time given. So normally what instructors do is that they select a text that goes from one paragraph to one page. It doesn't need to be that long. What it needs to be is really deep, really, yeah, a really meaningful text for them. Then you give students time to prepare. So before beginning the seminar, it is essential that students have time to prepare ideas. So students should annotate the text before the start of the class discussion. And instructors often assign a discussion leader who generates a few open-ended questions that can be used to begin with the seminar. Now, and then you develop a classroom contract. This is really important because these seminars may have rules that do not apply to other forms of discussions. So before beginning the seminar, it is important that everyone is aware of the norms. So normally, or the typical rules used structure a Socratic seminar activity can be something like talk to each other, not just talk to the discussion leader, refer to evidence from the text to support your ideas. So you always have to support your ideas based on the text given. Ask questions if you don't understand what someone has said, but do it in a polite way. You do not need to raise your hand to speak, or you don't need to raise your voice. And make sure that you don't speak much more than others. Don't interrupt. Learn to listen. Don't put down the ideas of another student without judging the student you disagree. Or there are other classroom contract rules that you can actually involve just for students to understand that um, they need to listen, and they need to give other people's opinion the appropriate value, the right value. Then you open the Socratic seminar. And a Socratic seminar activity often begins with a discussion leader. It can be the student, it can be you as the instructor asking an open-ended question. And the typical opening prompt is, what do you think this text means? And you might find some silence, and it's fine. It might take a few minutes for students to warm up, to be able to actually concentrate on their ideas to share with the class. So you can do this, and you can actually assign specific roles to students while you're having this conversation. So you should allot at least 15 minutes for this as part of the activity. But it can also take more than 15 minutes. So you have to really keep track on the discussions, and try not to intervene so much, but also make sure that they discuss enough, but that it doesn't take the whole class, if you like. Then, of course, after the discussion, the group discussion has taken place, you have to give students the opportunity to evaluate the process in general and their own performance specifically. So reflecting on the seminar process helps students improve their ability to participate in future discussions on this with these types of activities, and it will help them not only evaluate the process, but also appreciate um, the fact that other people have different opinions, but they can also find a common ground. So a few questions that you can ask. You can ask students, for example, did the seminar revert to something other than a dialogue? If so, how did the group handle this? What evidence did you see of people actively listening and building on others' ideas? This is a really important question, asking them how to asking them to reflect on their listening skills. Or how has your understanding of this text been affected by the ideas explored in this seminar? So this is really important. This is a really nice way of having group discussions, because it goes beyond the whole topic discussion. It helps students also develop active listening skills. Then we have what it's called affinity mapping. I really like this one because it goes beyond the typical group discussion, but you give a students a broad question or problem that you know that will result in lots of different ideas or opinions. So what you do is that in the main room on Zoom, you have students generate responses by writing their ideas on the question or problem you posed on a Google Doc. So you open a Google Doc, or you open any shared document, and you create a chart or a table as you like, and you share that with the doc with students, and you ask them to just join the doc and write any idea in any column in any place they want on your document. Once you have lots of ideas gathered, you open breakout rooms or Google Hangouts and have students begin grouping them in similar categories. So you give them the whole ideas and you tell them, okay, so what we're going to do now is that you're going to categorize these ideas. You categorize them, you label the categories, And you need to discuss in your groups why these ideas fit within each category and how you can actually relate one category to the other. So this will help students not only discuss the topic that you want them to talk about critically and actively talk about, but they will also this activity will also help them work with grouping uh, ideas and categorize ideas, as this is a very important academic skill that they need to develop. Normally, this activity serves greatly as a pre-writing exercise. You can have this before asking students to write a paper. The paper can be assigned as homework, but you can also have students write the paper in groups during your sessions, your online sessions. The last activity, group discussion strategy, that I want to talk to you about is what is called conversations. I really like this one because first of all, it can be used face-to-face, it can be used online, but it can also be used at any level with any topic. So how do you do this? So what you do is that using breakout rooms or Google Hangouts, students are placed into a few groups and are given a discussion question to talk about. After sufficient time has passed for the discussion to develop, one or two students from each group rotate to a different breakout room, while the other group members remain where they are. I forgot to mention that for conversations, you actually need to have different questions, and you assigned different discussion questions to talk about. So each breakout room will have a different discussion question that is related. You have like a main topic, and then out of the main topic, you have different questions that they need to discuss, one per group. So again, after you have given them enough time for them to discuss, one or two students from each group rotate to a different breakout room, okay? So while the other group members remain where they are. Once in their new room, they will have to discuss a different question. It's related to it, but it's related to the topic, but it's a different question. So they may also share some of the key points from the last group's conversation. So the new members of the breakout room, they share what they discussed in the previous group, and then the team members who have been who didn't move, who stayed in the same group, they also provide the new team members a brief overview of the conversation that took place before they joined. Then for the next rotation, you make sure that you rotate the students who did not rotate before. So you will have groups that are continuously evolving, and you will have groups that will have always new members. And the key here is that you have the new members of the group sharing what they talked about in the previous group, but you also have the members that didn't rotate having a brief overview of the conversation. You may allow each group 2 or 3 minutes and before asking them to rotate. And it might be helpful to ask students to record notes from their conversation to make sure that you continue these rounds until all conversations have been visited. And finally, you have to really keep track on this. You have to really provide time limits for each of the conversations, so it won't take for your whole class forever to finish this. It's really fun. Students get really involved, but it can take a lot of time. So you really need to keep track on this. Last but not least, the best strategy that you can use in your classes for group discussions for involving students in active learning and helping them foster critical thinking skills is yourself. You need to show passion for the content. You need to show passion for teaching because students can tell. And if they see a passionate instructor, they will become passionate learners. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this recording.